Well, good evening. It's Robert Wilson with Cowboy Wisdom uh, Unleashed podcast. Tonight is 7 ways why the Liberator rises you beyond healer and educator. Because the Liberator refuses the limitation roles they require. The healer needs you to be wounded. The educator needs you to be uninformed. Their power depends on your limitations and on you staying small enough to be treated or taught. The Liberator shatters these roles instantly. It rises you out of being a patient or being a pupil and restores you to sovereign instinct, where no one gets to define your capacity. Because the Liberator moves from instinct, never repair or instruction. The healer circles pain and the educator circles knowledge. Both keep you orbiting in your past wounds, lessons, frameworks, and corrections. The Liberator erupts from breath-born immediacy. It doesn't repair you or instruct you. It liberates you. It returns you to sensing clarity and frontier perceptions that outruns every archive. As the Liberator restores sovereign clarity beyond their limits, the healer works in the museum of memory and the educator works in the museum of knowledge. Both operate from archives, emotional fossils, and inherited vocabulary. The Liberator operates from nowality, instinctual voltage, untamed perception, and warrior wise immediacy. It rises you out of their limitations onto your own savage clarity. That's a new word I use now instead of mindset. Savage clarity. How does that feel? Where you no longer need to be healed or educated to be whole. What is a liberator? What a liberator is a feral, forthright frontier wise man or woman. A liberator is the one force in you that refuses every museum mind rerun, every identity exhibit, and every inherited limitation. It is the instinct, unchained clarity, uncolonized sovereignty, and unnegotiated life. A liberator is your instinctual voltage beyond the roles of whatever. An instinctual voltage is the liberator, is the part of you that does not wait to be healed, taught, corrected, or approved. It moves from beneath born immediacy, never memory, never mindset, never emotional fossils. It is your raw, sovereign navigation system. A liberator is the dissolver of identity, exhibits an identity delusion. The healer needs you wounded. The educator needs you uninformed. The liberator requires nothing. It collapses the persona you were trained to maintain and frees the conscious that was never broken. A liberator is a frontier force that restores sovereign clarity. Frontier clarity, thinking is archived caution, knowing is inherited obedience, whether it's ancestor, social, or educational, but it's obedient. The liberator rises you beyond both onto to experience your nowality, instinct, and untamed perceptions. It is the part of you that sees without filters, listens without ego, and moves without permission. The essence of a liberator is the liberator is never a healer, teacher, or a role, and never a method. It is the sovereign frequency inside you that refuses captivity and restores your original clarity. And what is a healer? A healer is the role, the function, the frequency that works inside the wound, and inside the story, and inside the emotional archive. A healer operates in the museum of memory, tending pain, restoring function, soothing character you were never taught, soothing the character you were never taught to be. A healer works inside the wound, never beyond it. And inside the wound work, the healer's domain is pain, hurt, emotional fossils, and resolved narratives. They help you feel better within the story, but never free you from the story. So that's why you want to stop talking about whatever happened in your past. You never want to talk about that story. You want to talk about what's liberated and what's beyond that story, and send the Tory home. Their power comes from tending what happened, never dissolving the identity built around it. A healer strengthens the character, never the consciousness. Character strengthening. The healer upgrades the persona, coping tools, emotional regulation, soothing repair. They help the character function better, but they never question whether the character itself is the cage. Healing improves the mask, it does not remove it. A healer restores balance inside a museum mind. A museum mind restoration, that's all healing is. The healer works with memory, meaning, and emotional archives. They help you reorganize the exhibits, trauma, patterns, triggers, and wounds, but never move you forward. Their work is valuable, but it's still inside the museum. They never dissolve the museum itself, the essence of a healer. The healer is the one who helps you mend the wound, soothe the pain, and restore the function, but they never free you from the identity built around the wound. They help the character survive. They do not awaken the consciousness. What is an educator? An educator is the role, the function, the frequency that works inside the framework, inside the lesson, and inside the inherited vocabulary. An educator operates in the museum of knowledge, organizing concepts, transferring information, shaping the character you were taught to be. An educator works inside the framework, never beyond it. Framework-bound teaching. The educator's domain is structure, models, theories, steps, systems. They help you understand the world as it has been explained to them, not as it's sensed by your prowess and your power. Their power comes from reinforcing the map, never dissolving the map. An educator strengthens the thinking mind, never the sovereign instinct. Mind strengthening. The educator upgrades your mental scaffolding, vocabulary, logic, and interpretations, and analysis. They help the character become more competent, more informed, and more correct. They never question whether thinking itself is in the cage. An educator organizes a museum mind, never the frontier mind. The museum mind organization is the educator works with archived knowledge, facts, concepts, categories, and definitions. They help you arrange the exhibits, understanding, clarity, and comprehension. Their work is valuable, but it's still inside the museum. They never dissolve the museum itself. An educator is the one that helps you learn, understand, organize knowledge, but they never free you from the identity built around the knowledge. They strengthen the character's mind. They never awaken the consciousness. Why the Liberator rises you out of the captive control of the healer and the educator. Because the Liberator answers to instinct, never instruction. The healer wants you to revisit wounds. The educator wants you to rehearse frameworks. As the Liberator refuses both, it moves from breath-born immediacy, not emotional fossils, and mental scaffolding. Liberation erupts the moment you stop being a patient or a student and start listening and entertaining a sovereign savvy. The Liberator dissolves roles the healer and educator depend on. The healer needs you wounded. The educator needs you uninformed. Both require a version of you that stays small enough to be helped. The Liberator shatters the identity exhibit they rely on, collapsing persona, correctness, lineage logic, and returns you to instinctual voltage. Because the Liberator restores your frontier clarity beyond the healer and the educator's control. The healer works in the museum of memory. The educator works in the museum of knowledge. Both operate from archives of yesterday. The Liberator operates from nowality, sovereign sensing, untamed perception, and warrior-wise immediacy. It frees you from being interpreted, corrected, or instructed, and rises you onto your savage clarity. Why Liberator is beyond the thinking, knowing mind museum and invented egotistical arrogance. Because the Liberator moves from instinct, never the museum of thinking. Thinking is archived caution. Knowing is ancestor obedience. Thinking is social obedience. Both are museum mind reruns stitched from yesterday's vocabulary. And yesterday's vocabulary is a captive vocabulary. A liberating lingo rises you out of all this. The Liberator rises beyond them because it operates from sovereign immediacy, instinctual voltage that can never be domesticated by analysis, logic, or mental scaffolding. Because the Liberator dissolves the ego's invented arrogance. The Liberator dissolves the ego's invented arrogance. How do you live life through your arrogance and your ego's arrogance and never admitted it? I have. I still do. But I catch myself now. The ego's arrogance is a curator voice that I already know. It shuts off listening, collapses perception, and reenacts identity. The Liberator shatters that stance instantly, replacing knowing with sensing, replacing correctness with clarity, replacing persona with frontier truth. Because the Liberator refuses the mind museum's captivity. The mind museum is built from emotional fossils, inherited logic, identity exhibits. It loops you backward, narrates your clarity, and protects the character you were taught to be. Because that's all that does is teach you who you were. The Liberator rises beyond all of it with a forthright, breath-driven sovereignty, restoring here and now perception that is alive and thriving, immediate and uncolonized. I like that word, uncolonized, because we're colonized now. Why Liberator is beyond the thinking, knowing mind museum and invented egotistical arrogance, because the Liberator rises from instinct, never the museum of thinking. See, that's where the world is stuck, is in the museum of thinking and archived in the knowledge museum. Thinking is archived caution. Knowing is lineage obedience. Both are museum mind reruns stitched from yesterday's captive vocabulary. The Liberator stands beyond them because it moves from sovereign immediacy, instinctual voltage that can never be domesticated by analysis, logic, or mental scaffolding. Because the Liberator dissolves the ego's invented arrogance. Ego arrogance is a curator voice saying, I already know. I've done that. I'll do it tomorrow. No, it shuts off listening, collapses perception, and reenacts identity. The Liberator shatters the stance instantly, replacing knowing with sensing, as replacing correctness with clarity, replacing persona with frontier truth. Because the Liberator refuses the captivity of Mind Museum. The Mind Museum is built from emotional fossils, inherited logic, and identity exhibits. It loops you backwards, narrates your clarity, and protects the character you were taught to be. It narrates the clarity of who you were. The Liberator rises beyond all of it. Forthright, breath-driven, sovereign perception that is alive, immediate, and uncolonized. Why healer and educator dig up victim mentality within you. Because both roles depend on you being not enough. The healer needs you wounded. The education needs you uninformed. Their entire structure collapses if you stand in the sovereign immediacy. So they dig up victim mentality, not out of malice, but out of dependence. Victim mentality, not out of malice, but out of dependence. Your limitation is their relevance. Because victim mentality keeps you inside their museum of memory and knowledge. The healer works in emotional fossils. The educator works in archived logic. Your victim mentality is a perfect tether to both. That's why it keeps you revisiting wounds and rehearsing lessons inside instead of rising onto your and energizing your instinctual voltage. It anchors you into yesterday so the frameworks stay necessary. Because victim mentality prevents sovereign sensing from replacing their authority. Sovereign sensing dissolves roles. Savage clarity dissolves identity exhibits. Frontier perception dissolves dependency. As you rise on through instinct, you no longer need to be healed or taught. You become sovereign navigation in your own life. As they unconsciously resurrect victim mentality to keep their authority intact. And how do you see that in self-help personal growth? They restruct and resurrect all the past so they can keep you inside that little clutches. Why the Liberator rises you out of victim mentality. Because the Liberator destroys helplessness with sovereign sensing. And that's something, excuse me, that's something I'm really awakening to, is sense instead of feel and all that. You sense, like the word today, I invented a new word for, instead of mindset, it's savage clarity. And it's what you sense when you say the word and not what you fall back to, because mindset takes you backwards. Sovereign clarity takes you forward. Victim mentality is built from memory, old wounds, old meanings, and old emotional fossils. The Liberator dissolves all that by returning you to instinct, immediacy, and breath-driven clarity. Sovereign sensing makes it possible to reenact the something happened to me. narrative, because you're perceiving from the now, never the archive. Because the liberator shatters the exhibits identity exhibits that victimhood depends on. Victim mentality is an identity, a curated exhibit the museum mind protects. It keeps you small, cautious, obedient to yesterday's logic. The liberator collapses that exhibit in one strike, dissolving persona correctness and inherited roles. Once identity falls, victimhood has nowhere to live. Because the liberator restores your frontier agency beyond all narratives. Victim mentality is a story, a mental rerun, a museum mind narration. And that's why mental health never lets you out of that story. The liberator rises you into frontier agency, instinctual voltage, and sovereign movement. Voltage is the power that forces your electricity through its electromotive forcing electricity through the wires. Warrior wise immediacy. You stop being a character in an old script and become the author of your own nowality. Agency replaces victim the moment instincts outruns memory. While liberator rises untamed curiosity, politically incorrect inspiration, intuition, picturesque imagination, inventive innovation, sculpting my luxurious, relaxing, desired lifestyle. Because the liberator unleashes untamed curiosity beyond every museum mind limit. Untamed curiosity is a sovereign perception in motion, instinct exploring without permission. The healer circles the wounds. The educator circles the frameworks. The liberator breaks both circles and opens the frontier where curiosity becomes your compass. That curiosity is what begins sculpting the lifestyle you desire, because it unveils possibilities and scenarios of your desired lifestyle. You're thinking knowing mind never saw. Because politically incorrect inspiration frees your intuition from cultural obedience. Politically incorrect inspiration is the voltage that dissolves correctness, lineage logic, and inherited caution. It frees your intuition from the museum mind's obedient loops. Once intuition is uncolonized, it becomes the architect of your luxurious, relaxing lifestyle, sensing what nourishes you instead of what society approves. Because the liberator ignites picturesque imagination and inventive innovation as a lifestyle sculpting wisdom. The mind museum interprets life through memory. Your liberator perceives life through imagination, sovereign frontier, breath-driven fun of the sun's splendor. Picturesque imagination becomes your design language. Inventive innovation becomes your building tool. Together they sculpt your desired lifestyle, never from your past limitations, but from your instinctual clarity of here and now. Why Liberator unleashes campaigners' courage to hearken wisdom, insight, and clarity from your daily experiences. Why the Liberator unleashes the campaigner courage, because the Liberator turns every experience into instinctual intel. Campaigner courage rises when you stop treating daily moments as random events and start hearkening them as sovereign signals of savvy. The Liberator makes your day a battlefield of clarity. Every conversation, every sensation, and every breath becomes wisdom fuel instead of noise of indoctrinated whatever. That's warrior wise perception, sassy, sharp, uncolonized. Because the Liberator dissolves hesitation and replaces it with frontier boldness. Campaigner courage is born, is instinct, and outruns doubt. The healer is cautious. The educator wants you correct. Liberator wants you unleashed. It ignites a sassy, sovereign boldness that lets you move through your day with clarity instead of second guessing. A warrior walking with voltage, never permission. Because the Liberator makes your intuition the campaign leader of your life. Campaigner courage rises when intuition becomes your navigator. Wow, that was a tough word today. Navigator. Because why Liberator rises you beyond healer and education. The healer the Liberator just frees you to not to be attached to the past. And that's what it does. It allows you to listen and hearken to wisdom and the frontiers of your day. But Liberator doesn't make you think about life. It lets you listen and hearken life, the wisdom of life. It takes yesterday out of your life. And it just frees everything up for you to enjoy your life. You get to enjoy a healthy, wealthy day with fresh experiences every day. But it doesn't take you back to the past and keep you thinking about what you already did. And it doesn't keep reiterating it liberates you to be free. And that's all it does. And when you say, what do you sense when you say liberator? Do you feel how quiet you become on the inside? That's what Liberator and the liberating lingo does. It quiets you on the inside. But Liberator is just listening internally, boldly energizing, revolutionizing, adventurous, trend-setting optimism, realizing life is fun. Campaigner courage is born as instinct that outruns doubt. The healer wants you cautious. The educator wants you correct. The liberator wants you unleashed. And it ignites a sassy, sovereign boldness that lets you move through your day with the greatest of ease, unleashing your savage clarity instead of second guessing yourself. It's about being liberated and enjoying life. As your campaigner courage becomes your lifestyle, your instinct leading clarity, speaking sovereignty, steering you onto your frontiers of your fresh foresight, onto your beaches of bountiful bliss, kissing the good life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. And that's what we're going to say now is good night. And may your life flow of lavish abundances today and every day. And enjoy a healthy, fun summer weekend.